We continue our reading of Lest We Forget, a daily devotional by author George R. Knight. Today's reading, September 7, Doing Theology, Appeals to Ellen White's Authority, Part 4. They welcomed the message very eagerly and examined the Scriptures every day to see whether these things were so. Acts 17:11. The faithful Bereans studied the Scriptures faithfully to uncover the truth. That is exactly what Ellen White was seeking to get the Adventist leadership to do in the late 1880s. But too many of them were looking to her writings to solve their biblical issues instead of doing their homework in the Bible. It was just that problem that she tried to head off. Her misguided followers, quote unquote, may have failed in getting her to produce a testimony on the Galatians issue, but they could at least feel a wave of thankfulness that they at least had her published writings on the topic, especially since she had seemingly identified the law in her Sketches from the Life of Paul, 1883. From diary entries, we know exactly what pages certain individuals read at the 1888 session. On October 24, J.H. Morrison utilized sketches in his attempt to demonstrate the validity of the ceremonial law interpretation. Turning to page 193, he read to the delegates, Paul, describes the visit which he made to Jerusalem to secure a settlement of the very questions which are now agitating the churches of Galatia, as to whether the Gentiles should submit to circumcision and keep the ceremonial law. End quote. Next, Morrison quoted from her discussion of the nature of the Galatians problem on page 188. Quote, having gained this point, they, the Judaizing Christians, induced them, the Christians at Galatia, to return to the observance of the ceremonial law as essential to salvation. Faith in Christ and obedience to the law of 10 Commandments were regarded as of minor importance. Morrison also read from page 68, in which Mrs. White spoke on the yoke of bondage mentioned in both Acts 15:10 and Galatians 5:1. Quote, this yoke was not the law of 10 Commandments, as those who oppose the binding claim of the law assert, but Peter referred to the law of ceremonies, end quote. Having submitted this evidence, Morrison sat down, and the traditionalists must have believed they had clinched the argument. After all, they had a quotation from Ellen White. Thus they were right, and Wagner and Jones were wrong on the basis of her commentary on the Bible. That position, as we will see tomorrow, was not the one Ellen White took. Guide us, Father, as we contemplate the important question of religious authority and the relationship of the gifts of the Spirit to the Bible. This concludes our reading today of Lest We Forget.